right, people are filing in. Welcome everybody. We'll let everybody enter the webinar. Welcome to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. My name is Chris. I'm the events coordinator. And tonight we are very pleased to be hosting the launch of Love Poems for the Office by John Kenney. Be in conversation with Charlie McKittrick. You can buy copies of the book at powerhousebookstores.com. The link is in the event page and posted in the chat now. I have word that we will have signed copies for anyone who buys through us. Is that right?
That's absolutely true. I'm going to come by tomorrow and sign hundreds of books. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll have some signed copies and book plates too. So hopefully we can have signed copies of all your books. And if anybody has any questions, we have the Q&A function and we'll have the chat open too. And before I hand it over, I'll introduce our speakers now. John Kenney is the New York Times bestselling author of the poetry collections Love Poems for Married People, Love Poems for People with Children, and Love Poems for Anxious People. And the novels Talk to Me and Truth in Advertising, which won the Thurber Prize for American Humor. He has worked for many years as a copywriter and has been a contributor to The New Yorker since 1999. He lives in Brooklyn, New York. Charlie McKittrick is Chief Strategy Officer and Partner for Mother, overseeing the strategy overall for Mother in the United States, as well as their clients. An accidental entrepreneur, Charlie ran his own design studio, produced independent feature films that competed at Sundance, and earned his MBA with honors in finance and marketing. Before Mother, Charlie worked at Ogilvy and Mather on brands like Motorola, UPS, and Coke Zero. He has a wife, 2 kids, lives around the corner from Powerhouse Books, and finds public radio pledge drives immensely calming. And I'll hand it over now.
It was actually Power Tuesday on WNYC today. And they didn't give yet, but I did find it very soothing. Thank you, Powerhouse Arena. Hi, John.
Charlie, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Do we? I'm seeing chats come in, but I don't see anybody else. Is that normal? Is that okay?
Yes, I'm happy to respond as people ask questions.
Somebody asked if they could virtually heckle.
That's my friend Larissa, and boy, well, she's good at it. So Charlie, thank you for taking the time out of your back-to-back Zoom days to do this. It's much appreciated.
So such my pleasure. Should we just get into it, or is there anything housekeeping we need to do?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons, besides our shared background in advertising, Charlie was kind enough to host at Mother a wonderful party in 2013 for my first novel. What was the first novel? Love Poems for Truth in Advertising. Truth in Advertising, which was incredibly gracious of him. And he and his wife are dear, dear friends with my editor, Sally Kim, and her husband.
Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure. Actually, I had this moment where I thought, I should go dig up old photos from that party at Mother and broadcast them, but then I didn't have the time.
Yeah, no, it'd be great.
We actually we closed that office because we signed a new lease in Gowanus, which we're going to be sort of kitting out and moving into. And in the process of all of that, we've been sort of talking to everybody and studying everything. And it strikes me that your book now more than ever is actually super interesting because it's about all of the things that everybody's missing. Like the working from home part is going really well. The meetings, the Zoom, the concentration, like it's going to be hard to get people back in the office. But the thing that's not going well is like socializing at work, which is sort of, as you say, it's like the mundane world of the office, the banal and the messy stuff. And I think that's what's so lovely about this book, and the sort of all the incidental and accidental moments. But I imagine, I think it's true, you started writing this before we were in a global stay-at-home plague, and yet I'm imagining you had to finish it while you were in it. And so there's part of me that's like, how much started as irony, then turned to nostalgia, and then like, how did all of that work?
Well, it's funny you ask, because it did start before the pandemic. I had written love poems for married people and love poems for people with children, and we had some luck with those. And towards the end of last year, I went back and checked. It was late October, November-ish, and Sally Kim, my editor and our dear friend, we were sort of tossing around different ideas, and I found some of the ideas because love poems for married people and love poems for people with children feel of a family, and we weren't quite sure what to do next. Some of the suggestions were love poems for not yet divorced people, love poems for the divorce curious, love poems for depressed people. That was my idea. Love poems for people with aging parents. Hilarious. Love poems for people with pets. Putnam was quite keen on that one. Love poems for serial killers. That was Sally's idea. And I think love poems for anxious people was also Sally's idea. And I was keen on that. And then, yeah, I think it was either Sally or my wife, Lissa, who is a trusted editor of mine, suggested love poems for The Office. And in fact, we were going to go with Office first. But we went with anxious first. And, you know, if you think about the two choices, we launched love poems for anxious people in March, genius, and love poems for The Office now. So it's just, Charlie, it's just good timing branding wise.
Can you just give me the title of your next one so I can do my
It's
stock purchasing hedge strategies now?
Love Poems for the Apocalypse.
Perfect.
So we're super excited about that. Yeah, so the anxious people, we thought, won't that be funny? And that came out in the midst of the, like right at the sort of peak of all the terribleness. Yeah, but the Office one started in, you know, sort of January-ish, started writing, and then it just changed so dramatically. And I mean, office life, even as a freelance writer, I spent, like you, we both worked at Ogilvy for many years. And I mean, office life is such a part of your everyday existence, right? I mean, the friendships and the routines and the people you talk to and the coffee and to have that all sort of upended, it is, you know, you and I were chatting before the call started, and it's this really deeply personal thing, because you get to know these people as well, if not better maybe, than family members, right? They're with you a lot. And so I think working from home is nice. I think I miss not going in, because as a freelancer, you know, you go into these places sometimes, and, you know, I don't know about you, but I miss seeing people.
Well, that's, I mean, I think especially in our business, which is a creative business, it's all of the conversations that you shouldn't be having and all of the things that you shouldn't be doing. And, you know, those are all of the things that actually then contribute to more productive creative ideas, which is what your book is about, right? Because that's also funny and messy, you know, and ironic, but there is such a real, it's funny, the tone of the book, you start with the Bertrand Russell quote, which, you know, sets this irony to it. And yet there's a real nostalgia to the whole book as well. I don't know, you tell me, but it's hard to make fun of something like that unless you really love it.
Yeah. You know, like you have worked in offices for what, 25 years, right? It's, you look forward to going in the morning, right? I mean, we're lucky enough to have jobs where, look, not every day is great. I mean, there's drudgery, but it's the people who make it, you know, as Ricky Gervais sort of brilliantly observed, it's these people. You know, part of it's the work, but as the Bertrand Russell quote, and I'll read that, you know, in a minute, unless you are doing cancer research, chances are pretty good you're doing something fairly mundane, marketing, branding, widget making. But these people you run into who you sort of waste time with, it makes a huge difference. I think it was the Harvard Business School a while back did a study of during an 8-hour day, how long people work, and it was just shy of 4 hours. Socializing, meetings, go get coffee, go for a walk around the office. So
then I was going to ask, because what I really loved about all the different poems was there's so many different points of view. It's written from different voices. It's different for different jobs, different genders, different job titles, and it's like I've always wondered when I watch sitcoms, and I know a fair amount of sitcom writers. It's the observational detail that makes it so good, and that's what's so I love about all of your poems. But how do you know? But I know what you do for a living, and I know the kinds of offices that you go to, and yet you write from the point of view of a finance person, you write from the point of view of a lawyer, you write from the point of view of other people. Like, how do you know what the banal, everyday office parts are of those lives?
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. I don't, I'm guessing, I rely on wonderful friends. So if I write, there are 2 women on, I think tonight, my friend Claudette and Lynette, project managers whose life is corralling the lunatics of creative, of strategy, of account service, and saying, I'm going to clean up the mess of these children, right? So I know them, I listen to them, and honestly, I just try to parlay what they say, right? I mean,
you did a great job. There's this one reference to the always untouched macaroni salad that was just.
I have to give huge credit too, because you don't write these things alone, and Sally's group at Putnam, Alexis Welby and Ashley Hewlett and Gabby Mongelli and Emily Milnick. All of these people, and apparently there are men who work in publishing too, all of them send ideas, and they find these voices. So a lot of times there's a group of 10, 15 trusted friends who will send me ideas. They take the ball to the 5-yard line, and I just sort of run across with it.
Did you, so we talked earlier, what I also loved about this too is it's the book itself is a secret sandwiched between a Q&A section and a legitimate piece of poetry, which went over my head. I didn't understand. It was too sophisticated. But I think maybe it helped me make sense of your first book, but we can talk about that later. But that's a little bit, did you make Sally pay for that stuff too? And how does that all fit together? Because it's like, I almost want to petition you to just do a Q&A book.
Sally loved the idea of the Q&A. She's laughing right now through her wine glass. I'll read the Q&A. Sally, the most trusted person in my writing life, I do what she says. She hated the Q&A. And in fairness, it was much longer and really bad, like really bad. But I worked on it, and I just felt like we needed it. And Sally is one of the kindest editors, and will say things like, I wonder if we need it. I wonder if we need it. I kind of don't think we do. So let me read the Bertrand Russell quote and the sort of Q&A. And so the Bertrand Russell quote, I sort of minored briefly in philosophy in college for a month before I realized how difficult it was. So considering how much he did in his life, I love a man that serious wrote this. And he said, one of the symptoms of an approaching nervous breakdown is the belief that one's work is terribly important. I have been known to be that way too, saying to a room full of people, this is a manifesto about gravy. What aren't you people getting? So this is a Q&A with the author. And the first question here says, your last collection, Love Poems for Anxious People, came out at almost the exact time the coronavirus hit the United States. Now you have love poems for the office, and many offices are either closed or at least radically changed. Should you stop writing books? The answer is that's a great question, and you're not the first person to suggest that. My publishers, friends, readers, and my parents also suggested it. Next question says, what will your next untimely book be? The answer is Love Poems for the Apocalypse. Question says, I read your previous collection, Love Poems for Anxious People. The answer says, thank you. The question says, I'm joking, I didn't. The answer says, oh. Question says, why offices? The idea was my editors is the answer. My initial idea, Love Poems for middle-aged poets who wish they had gone into finance instead of poetry, because now they have almost no money in the bank and are royally screwed, was rejected by my publisher. Question says, have you ever worked in an office? The answer is no, but I've certainly applied many times. I haven't heard back. The question says, what you've done with this book is take the mundane world of the office and turn that world into mundane poems. The answer is, I think that's exactly right. The question says, you have been called the greatest poet of your generation. What's that like? The answer is, I hadn't heard that. The question is, wait, sorry, that was Mary Oliver who was called the greatest poet of her generation. No one has called you anything except for some very bad names on Goodreads. Would you like to hear them? The answer is, I'll pass.
Who's the Q?
That's probably my wife. I would think that's my wife.
And do you want to talk about the poem at the end, or should we read some of the things in the middle?
Why don't I read some of the ones in the middle? You had pointed out a few. Yeah. So this first one is called Hold the Elevator. If I am honest, I did see you holding those 2 coffees, a file wedged under one arm. Jill, right? So let me explain what happened there, Jill. I was kind of in a rush to get back to my desk, not to a meeting or anything, just to eat my lunch and simply space out watching YouTube. So I had been standing in that elevator a good 7 seconds, which can feel like a long time in an elevator. And I pressed the close button door a few times, maybe 10, when I saw you shuffling toward the elevator, smiling, eyes wide, as if to say, hold the door. Please don't take this as a criticism, but you are a slow walker, Jill. Also, the doors had started to close, in large part because I was pressing the closed door button, but making it look like I was pressing the open door button while making a face like, how do these crazy buttons work? This is so complicated. The point is, get the next elevator, Jill.
I love that one.
You're very kind. This is called Zoom Calls in the Time of Coronavirus, Part 1. Mary is sitting on her Peloton, pedaling and talking. Ben is in his car, waiting to go into a car wash. Terry is in his daughter's room, surrounded by pink stuffed animals. Greg is taking a shower, which makes it hard to hear him. No one cares. It's Zoom. Zoom, it turns out, is from the Greek word for no one gives a fuck anymore. It's not true. That happened to me on a Zoom call where someone was in the shower. We couldn't figure out what was happening, but they were talking over the curtain. I won't say who that was, but they did work at Putnam.
I did think if there were a plugin for the Peloton to take your Zoom call, that seemed like a good innovation to me.
By the way, my daughter, who is 11, just texted me on the chat and said, "Bad word, Johnny." Why don't I read? I'm fond of this one. I doubt he's on the thing, but my former boss and dear friend Andy Bird was the inspiration for this, and I hope he's not offended by that. My dear friend Eddie Joyce just says, Jeffrey Toobin doesn't think that's funny. This poem is called A Review of the Office Holiday Party from the Police Report. The food ran out. That was the problem. The booze didn't, though. That was also part of the problem. Kissing people was another part of the problem. In all, there were lots of parts to the overall problem. Another significant problem was that I was dancing, alone, according to eyewitnesses, and spinning and singing a song I had made up. Take your pants off. Come on, everybody, take your pants off. And then, according to depositions, I performed a spinning move of such force that I somehow flung myself off the dance floor and into a table of several women from accounting who were chatting with the CFO, breaking the table, and then throwing up on myself and the CFO. I think that was the main problem. Still, prior to that, it was one of the better holiday parties.
It's going to be a very sad Christmas holiday party season this year in the agency world, I think.
Yeah, it is, because normally those are just bacchanalian meltdowns. Are you guys, as mother, going to have a holiday party?
No. I don't know what we're going to do. I told you we rented a restaurant for a couple of months just to have a place for people to go and hang out. But even that, we have to be very, it's super optional, and we're being super cautious too, because of course, as soon as we had the brilliant idea to do it, all of the curves started popping up in New York and all that. So who knows? But no, I mean, and God knows nobody wants to have another fake virtual, holiday party. So.
Are you finding, how are people sort of mental health? I mean, I live with 2 little lunatic children, but I would think working from home, if you're alone, actually, even if with your family, are you hearing from people that it's, challenging? It's
sort of, yes. It's simultaneously fantastic and terrible.
Yeah.
Literally, that's the common thing. It's everybody feels super grounded. Everybody feels like they got in touch with parts of themselves they hadn't known. Everybody was completely relieved to get out of the rat race at work, the social rat race, the dating rat race. Like, that was all like fantastic. But then also everybody else is simultaneously pulling their hair out because you don't have transition time of the commute anymore. You leave your last meeting and then you go straight into cooking dinner and doing the dishes, and
right.
Your children are going to school while you're working, and
right.
And everybody's just, and whatever, there's a flatness to the Zoom experience that just makes it exhausting. So
yeah.
it's split, but it's literally an even split. Not 50-50 people, but it's literally everybody hates it and loves it simultaneously.
Yeah. There's also a casualness to the Zoom thing where I think there's this false intimacy. So you're seeing things like people just sort of getting up, spouses walking through semi-nude. It's, children and pets, and this is all fake behind me.
Oh, I rented this background from Room and Board.
This is I'm at an outdoor bar. Yeah, I don't know. I work from home or coffee shops, but you can't go to a coffee shop. You can't, it's just, and the idea that, after work, people would go and just an hour, have a beer, have a coffee, get together. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the part we're trying to sort of artificially replicate, but we'll see how successful we are.
This is a poem called Whose Meeting Is This?
It's one of my favorites.
After we had all filed in, found a seat, made some small talk, someone said, "I'm sorry, but whose meeting is this?" Someone asked if it was Cindy's meeting, but Cindy said she thought it was Jagdish's meeting. Jagdish seemed confused and said it was Alan's. Alan wasn't there, so it probably wasn't his meeting. Gary asked if it could have been a mistake, and then laughed too loud and got embarrassed and thought about crying but didn't. Jagdish said it couldn't be a mistake, that it was on his calendar. Cindy seemed super annoyed and said, If it was on your calendar to jump off a building, would you do it, Jagdish? It got quiet after that, during which everyone wondered, what was the point of this meeting? What was the point of any meeting, for that matter? They wondered where time went and why they hadn't done more with their lives. And as they filed silently out of the room to allow another meeting in, no one had any idea how they would account for this on their timesheet. Maybe these are quite specifically for advertising.
I mean, not at Mother, but yes, certainly, you know, much
No,
other more terrible, large, publicly owned holding companies that I've worked for.
I'll just read 30 or 40 more.
I really wanted you to read this is a plug for people buying the book because it can't be read, but it's the sticky spacebar one. But John explained to me earlier that it's literally a sticky spacebar poem, and therefore it looks really, really great, but it doesn't read very well.
Yeah, the sticky spacebar poem looks like that. There's no spaces. That's what makes it funny. It's called My Third Email to Tech Support Regarding My Freaking Sticky Spacebar. This is called What I Would Do Differently If You Weren't My Boss. I wouldn't laugh the next time you tell that joke about the two nuns because it's not funny or even physically possible. I would just stare at you as if to say, you're a dickhead. And then I might say out loud, you're a dickhead. And when you came by my cubicle to ask if I had gotten to that report, even though you could see that I was eating an egg salad sandwich, only to say, I guess it'll have to wait until after your lunch, and make a face and say how much you hate egg salad, I might say something like, that's funny because I hate your face. I would say that even if you weren't my boss and I didn't have a mortgage. And then I might add that your kids are weird looking because they are. One or two more, and then we'll do this whole thing again in French. This is called You Will Be Missed. This place will not be the same without you, Wayne. You're the man. Do you know that? I certainly didn't know that. I just learned that today from some of the people here at this very small going away party in your office, which I wandered into after leaving a meeting early. Layoffs are the worst. I just wanted to say good luck finding a new job, especially in this economy, and also to introduce myself and ask if it would be okay if I took your chair and that awesome retro joke photo, which it turns out is not a retro joke photo, but your family. My bad. Okay to take the chair though.
I love that. I mean, it's simultaneously terrible and fantastic and so true.
Yeah, I mean, the awkwardness of, and maybe it's just me, but I remember, I don't think we crossed at Ogilvy. We may have, but I remember I had been at Ogilvy for a couple of years and it was Worldwide Plaza. And I was in the lobby waiting, you know, it was the morning, there were a lot of people, and I saw a good friend of mine who, I don't know if she had been on a shoot or she just hadn't been in a while. And so I saw her and I said, and I was old enough to know better. And I saw her and the words came out. I said, so when are you due? But as they came out, it was like, no, don't. And her face, it just sort of went, and she said, and you could all the air went out of the lobby. And everyone just sort of turned, and she said, "What did you say?" And I said, "You are beautiful to me." And luckily she was an incredibly gracious person, and I was purple. But, you know, as you and I talked about earlier, now, I mean, we could be in the delivery room and, you know, see the crowning, but I'm not saying it.
Like maybe when Lulu goes to college, I might say to your wife, "Congratulations on being pregnant."
Yeah.
Just to have that clear.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you're also, I mean, this is a special kind of author book launch Zoom. You don't get the word crowning, you know, in a lot of book launches that don't involve Atul Gawande. So this is called autocorrect. In regard to my recent chain of texts to you, in no way did I mean that the cost of the new shipment would be penises. I of course meant peanuts. I was typing quickly while walking. Nor did I mean the follow-up text. I've been paying in penises my whole life. I have no idea what I meant by that. I was simply trying to make light of the horror of sending the word penises to you, our senior client. I thought you might find that funny. I was wrong. Penises have no place in marketing. And may I just say again that I absolutely do not hope for your quick death. I of course meant quick deal. I do not want your quick death until the time comes for you to die. I'll stop here.
Good.
Why don't I read the tuna sandwich? My daughter is asking me if she could read a poem. Boo, come on down and you can read a poem.
Okay.
Okay. My daughter Lulu, who is 11 years old. Lulu, come here.
Better be a
All
good.
right. You want to read this one? All right.
I thought she was going to read one of her own.
What's that?
I am. I'm upstairs. Oh, it's a one. Wait, which one?
We want to read, hold on. You want to read that or, oh, I've got a good one for you to
Close
read.
the door. Yes.
I've got a good one for you to read. Read that one. So read the title
Okay.
first.
Thank you for heating up fish leftovers in the break room microwave again. I am assuming it's fish, though it certainly could be something else. A dead man's foot, for example. If the smell is any indication, break room's all yours.
Well done.
Bye.
Was
I'm
it,
eating sushi.
do you think it's funny or not really?
Yes, it is.
Oh, you're very kind. Didn't get the big laugh from her that I was hoping. All right. Why don't we read the tuna sandwich one?
It's worth it just for the Pret reference. That's sheer nostalgia just in itself.
So this is called Consider the Tuna Sandwich. Standing in line at Pret, yet again, a cold tuna sandwich in one hand, a bag of chips in the other, I got to thinking, should I also get a brownie bite? Yes, I should. I also got to thinking about lunch, about what I have spent, about the 261 working days in a year, about the $20 per day. That's roughly $5,220 a year, accounting for inflation. Now multiply that by the 30 years I've been working. That's roughly $156,000. If I had invested in the S&P 500, that's upwards of $500,000. Apparently the line had moved on by then, as it had been my turn for a while. Sir, the nice young man behind the counter looked worried. Don't cry, he said. I said, do you know that this tuna sandwich cost me $500,000? He didn't say anything for a time, but then he said, well, like you're also getting the brownie bite.
I love that one.
I'll read that last one, but you know, if anyone has any questions or.
There are questions. There are 7.
Oh, there are 7 questions?
Yeah.
I do want to say a big thanks to my wife, who is one of my trusted editors. I hope she's on. She might be on. She might be doing other things.
She is.
I also, there are some friends who are wonderful writers on, and if anyone's looking for a good novel to read, pick up Courtney Maum's, M-A-U-M. She has, there are a couple of books and they're behind me. Courtney, quickly, I'm having so much fun here without you. And Costa Alegre, I've posted on Instagram about that before. You must read Costa Alegre. And one of the best novels I've read in 10 years, Eddie Joyce's Small Mercies. A remarkable story of a family from Staten Island. So read that. Yeah, so. What else? I mean, can I answer any questions from anyone? I mean, you know, the people have asked about the money that you make as a freelance poet, and I mean, I don't want to get into numbers, but it's, you know, it ain't small. So, you know, but like book publishing in general is just
Ka-ching.
boom, baby. But I'm very, very lucky to be with the remarkable folks at Putnam and Sally's folks. But yeah, you know, the office thing, I mean, I'm hoping the vaccine comes soon, but you know, Charlie, you and I were chatting about this earlier today. How soon do we sort of go back to normal in offices and in big buildings? Like, I don't know. I mean, does it just start happening again where we get on the subway and do the same thing, get super close, and people sneezing in conference rooms and being okay with that?
Well, I mean, who knows? It's obviously going to be very vaccine related as well. I'm long on proximity. You know, I'm dying to get everybody back.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be hard. I think we're going to have to sort of, you know, motivate and you know, attract people back, not necessarily get them back. But what's going to happen? What's going to happen is you're like, Zoom works really well when everybody's in their own apartment. And Zoom works really well when you're in one meeting room and your client's in another meeting room. Zoom does not work well when you have 3 people in an office and 3 people in their apartments. And there's going to be a really long, awkward transitional period of sort of half going back into the office and half not being back in the office. And I think that's where the technologies is really going to let us down, and it's going to be super awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to know from, you know, your creative director and you know, my friend Andy Bird, you know, I mean, people always rise to the occasion. You know, people, you know, are still doing good work, but oftentimes, you know, unless you're doing a spreadsheet or something, you're sitting in a room with someone, you're coming up with ideas, you're bouncing off ideas, you're, you know, before a presentation, you're rehearsing, you're sitting there, and there's an energy that I mean, you know, Zoom's amazing, but it's not the same thing, right?
No, and I think especially it's an EQ killer. nobody can sort of smell the room enough to have an honest conversation that's super honest, I think.
Right.
And it's also a little bit I've noticed with I have a lot of empathy for the junior creatives, right? Because it's, as you know, it's personal presenting your ideas, and it's scary presenting your ideas, and it's one thing to sort of be huddled in the couch in the corner and like the funky mother second floor, be like, well, so I had this idea, and it's another thing to be on Zoom and all of a sudden the Klieg like to go on,
right?
20 people,
or the delayed laugh. Right. Or because there's an energy in a room, and like you get a room laughing and it's like, oh my God, my idea worked. And then it's just like radio silence because people were muted or. Yeah, I don't know.
No, this is our business is about accidents, and it's about,
so many businesses are about creativity, right? I mean, not just advertising. There's people sit and ideate and
So we'll all be in big plastic Tyvek suits with spit guards at our desks, walking around large, awkward, sterile.
Yeah, it's
spaces for most of the spring.
I know. I was just looking for one more, and then I'll read that last one, I guess. I hope I'm not. So this is called team building. It had been a long day of team building exercises, and I sort of thought we were on the same page as to how ridiculous it was. It turns out we were not on the same page, which may be why I did not catch you during the trust fall. I thought it would be funny, and it was, for me, briefly. I never thought you would land so hard, though, or that your head would make that sound, or need 4 stitches. Just as I never thought you would trust me, as I had once trusted you to give me a raise. Trust is a funny thing.
You got the backstage laugh from my wife across the room, who's
if I got a wife from your laugh, if I got a laugh from your wife, it makes my day. I introduced myself to your wife on the subway once. Like I was like, hi, we have a mutual friend. And she was just sort of like, good God, there's a homeless man bothering me. Sorry, I should have dog-eared these. I'll read one more and then that. Oh yeah, so this is called Reply. This happened to me about a month ago with a dear friend. I was getting my hair cut, and so why wouldn't I text back? But I texted her. Fortunately, I didn't say anything bad, although she was a little annoyed. I meant to text someone else, but because I'm kind of a winner. This is called Reply. What goes through Ted's mind? I wrote to Jerry after the meeting. Besides bird shit, I added an emoji of a bird, but then felt stupid. So I also added, like the idea of shortening the shipping time by warehousing, it was such a genius idea, although it was a pretty good idea. Then I added an emoji of a baby because Ted is short. Well, we're the same height. Then I wrote, you know what they say about managers who suggest shortening the shipping time? They probably have small penises. And I added another emoji of a crazy face with eyes crossed, which I knew Jerry would love. I didn't hear back from Jerry. I did hear from several other team members, including Ted, as I had hit reply all. By mistake, it was probably time to look for a new job anyway.
See, like, how did you know about shipping times and warehousing?
Dude, I mean,
that's like supply chain management jokes.
That's, that's like kind of my passion is shipping. Well, it's both. It's shipping and receiving. It's like 2 of my favorite things. So I'll read shall I read the last one, or?
Yes.
I'll read the last one.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think you should warn everybody.
yeah, I absolutely will. So you know, it's funny because these books, this is the fourth, started, I wrote a piece for the New Yorker magazine in like 2015, maybe 16, called Valentine's Day Poems for Married People. It was 7 or 8 silly poems about how, you know, long-term marriage, kids and stuff, it can be less than romantic. Although I am a very happily married man, feel very lucky to be married to who I am, as I think she's watching. And the folks at Sally's place thought it would be interesting to maybe turn them into a book. I never thought I could do more than a few of them, but with Sally's help and my wife's help, we did love poems for married people. And at the end, I had this, I've never written poetry. It went over my head in high school. You know, I read the sort of classics in high school. It was like reading music or Latin. It was just, I couldn't get it. And I think you have to probably be a very special 16, 17-year-old. I most certainly was not. And even in college, I was an English and journalism major. I read a lot of Shakespeare, which I sort of slowly got once I saw it, right? It's not meant to be read, it's meant to be heard. It's meant to be acted. And I also think I was reading the wrong poetry. I mean, Walt Whitman I sort of, you know, got, and then Seamus Heaney came to my school and spoke, and I was sort of like, whoa, what? Okay, so all of a sudden this is starting to be very different here. And I, through these books, because, well, they're not poetry, right? And I don't claim to be a poet. I'm a poet in much the same way, you know, Arby's is farm to table dining. There's a brevity and a picture that's painted with poetry that I think is very different than prose. And it's the best people, the Billy Collinses and Seamus Heaney's and Mary Olivers and Philip Larkins and Marie Howe. I'd like to read this. It's 100 words, and it's about her brother who passed away young. He was 35 or something like this. But I'd like to read this simply because in the researching of the book, I did read a lot of poetry because I was sort of reinvigorated by it. Anyway, this is a lovely poem, and it's a nice segue to the next one. So this is Marie Howe. It's called The Gate. I had no idea that the gate I would step through to finally enter this world would be the space my brother's body made. He was a little taller than me, a young man, but grown himself by then, done at 28, having folded every sheet, rinsed every glass he would ever rinse under the cold and running water. This is what you have been waiting for, he used to say to me. And I'd say, what? And he'd say, this, holding up my cheese and mustard sandwich. And I'd say, what? And he'd say, this, sort of looking around. Now, I think that's 100 words of extraordinary. It paints a picture that is really quite extraordinary, I think. Novelists are used to a long runway. That's not to say brevity and word choice aren't the nature of our everyday, but I think for a poet, it's even more reduction, right? By nature, it's more reductive to create something so extraordinary. Anyway, that is a long-winded way of saying it was important to me. in writing love poems for married people, it's all these silly poems about how difficult marriage is. And I thought, gee, marriage is wonderful. I feel very lucky to be married to the person I'm married to. So at the end, I attempted a real poem to my wife. And it was very hard to do. I'm not great with emotion. I'm one of 6 boys from a Boston Irish family. I went to an all boys high school. I'm an emotional moron. But I think poetry dares you to be courageous, to say things that you are afraid to say. And there's a universality in that, I think, and hope. So with love poems for people with children, it made sense for me to write one to my children. Though the dedication of that book was to Lulu and Hewitt, now is probably the wrong time to let you know that I am not your real father. You have to have something to talk about at the therapist when you're an adult child. The third one was about anxiety, and I wrote it about one of my brothers who passed away last year. He was a firefighter and had just retired, and he was at 9/11, and a remarkable guy, the least anxious person I'd ever met. Just Mr. Cool, amazing guy. And so this last one was about the books about work. And so the hardest working person I ever knew was my mother. She had 6 sons. She was barely 5 feet tall. Grew up in a neighborhood in Boston. Her dad was a firefighter. My dad's dad was a firefighter. My father was a firefighter. My dad, he had 4 kids before I was born and was badly injured on the job. And my mother was almost a widow and somehow managed to make his, meager salary work for the 6 of us, and always had a smile on her face. And so she worked. And so I thought I would attempt to write something in this book for her at the end. So I shall read this. And this is called, it's simply called For My Mother. I cannot seem to get it right, this small portrait of my mother. I've been trying. I know the details of her life, but I cannot know what she felt. This child of the Great Depression, oldest of 5, telephone operator out of high school, mother to 6 sons, the resume of a million American women. She worked. Here was an economics genius, stretching her husband's firefighter salary at Filene's Basement and Best Buy, coupons clipped and S&H green stamps pasted, shoes shined and clothes mended. How many dinners made and baths drawn, stories read and diapers changed, cries soothed and skates tied. Except I can't seem to get it right, sitting here at the dining room table on a warm spring evening, and again a few mornings later with coffee, and yet again on a cool Sunday evening, thinking on Sunday evenings with her, watching her favorite TV show, The FBI in color, gently rubbing salve into her psoriasis cracked hands from all the dishes, all that work. The smell of lilacs coming through the window brings me back. The sounds from the TV as my children watch Inside Out bring me back. Snippets from a movie about the complexity of emotions bring me back to her. But then most days do. She died suddenly at 50. I was 12. It's just that it kind of ruins you. You go on, grow up, get a job, get a life, act like a normal person, a whole person. You can't really explain to anyone, perhaps not even yourself, how it changes you, defines you, leaves you empty of something essential. What do you do with that? You name your daughter after her. You tell your son stories about her. the time she drove you to the fancy country club where your older brothers had caddied. Off you go, she said with a wink. Work. It was a Friday and you were 10 and you sat on the caddy bench all day waiting until you were called to lug the too big bag 9 holes. The nice man in the strange clothes signed your caddy card and you walked to the pro shop, handed it to the man at the little window, and he handed back a $5 bill. What a thing. What a moment. You took the dime she gave you and called her for a ride home. And while you waited, you walked into the pro shop, a place where caddies rarely went, to the small section for ladies, where among the skirts and putters and pink golf shoes, you saw a yellow plastic bag to hold golf tees. Yes, you thought. Yes. And in the car on the way home, you showed her the $3. I thought you said 5, she said. And then you handed over this worthless thing. This woman who had never played golf would never play golf. No one ever flew her anywhere on a business trip or put her up at a nice hotel or paid her expenses. I love it, she said, smiling. Her gift to me. I can't seem to get this right. I want to keep working on it. I don't want it to end. Yes, she would say, keep working.
That's super lovely.
That was very good.
Thank you for listening. And honestly, if there's any questions or any bulk orders, I guess at this point, Charlie and I will take them.
Wait, Courtney wanted to tell you that she has to put her kids to bed.
Oh,
So
okay.
she wanted you to answer hers.
Oh, okay. Courtney Mom has asked a question. Did I see it?
Lulu, do you know what the question is? Because
I can read it.
Yeah, could you read it, hon?
It says, John, I have an office question. When I freelanced as a namer at a big New York agency, the young lady who sat next to me kept grapes in a drawer of her file cabinet. There wasn't anything in the file cabinet, just grapes that she took from the breakfast buffet. She didn't even plate them. She just put them straight into the cabinet. As a poet, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's a classic. That's a classic technique in the making of office wine. I know that Charlie does the same thing with gin blossoms. I have no thoughts on the grapes in the drawer, other than she sounds interesting.
It's a really good idea.
There's a couple more.
Yes.
Okay. Lissa Kenney said, is it true that your wife is actually the genius behind your success?
That is undoubtedly true. She is the very beautiful, very smart. It's so funny. When the first book came out, Love Poems for Married People, there's lots of poems in there about, why are you in the shower with me? Or, how old are those baggy underpants? And we had a neighbor who came up to my wife and said, I am so sorry about all of that stuff that John wrote about you, which I thought was fantastic. And she was fairly mortified, but none of it's true-ish. But, Lissa is my best friend, and, with Sally, my sort of most trusted editor. So I give her, she's a brutal critic like Sally, and that she's, I stand there and wait for her to laugh when I show her stuff. And 9 out of 10 times, she's just like, paint me a picture, because this isn't working, friend.
Is she more direct than Sally?
Yes. Yeah, Sally. So you have to learn how to speak Sally. So if Sally emails you, because they're fairly short windows on the writing of these things, it's a couple of months. And so I tend to procrastinate and freak out, and then I get going. And so we got on a system with this last book where I was trying to send her a poem a day. And I think we did that for 2-3 weeks, maybe. And then I went on a boozer or something. I don't know. Something happened. And but if Sally emails back, and certainly this is true of the novels, you're in a good place. If she calls you, hey, I just wanted to talk about that chapter. Yeah. So what were you thinking? Sending me that. So she's the kindest editor in the world, but you have to read the subtitles. It was shit. Delete it. Start rewriting because what? So yeah.
You do an incredible Sally impersonation.
Hey.
And I only know her socially, so I can only get.
Oh, she's the best. She's got those big eyes which sort of pull you in, and that smile as she's telling you, yeah, this chapter's not working. It's just not. It's not. What's the word I'm looking for? Good. Yeah.
There's another question. There's a bunch more. Andy Bird said, John, where was the best place and smartest person you've ever worked with, and why was it me at Publicis?
Andy Bird, I hate to admit it because I don't like him personally, but he's the best creative director I've ever worked for. You know Andy Bird, Charlie? I think he was the youngest person to ever run an ad agency or be a partner. He was at Ogilvy when he was like 27, senior partner, and won everything. The drawback is he's from Newcastle, so you can't understand a word he says. So he walks around with a translator, like Gorbachev when he came to this country. It's just you can't, because the Geordie accent. But
there's a couple more. Sally Kim said a simple question: what do you both miss about The Office? The more basic and I don't know how to read that. Mundane, the better.
Mm-hmm. Charlie, what do you miss?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I miss everything. I mostly miss talking about the wrong thing. That's when you're supposed to
stumble upon something.
Yeah, and you just end up having an entirely wrong conversation about something you shouldn't have. That's sort of what I miss the most.
Yeah, that's really cool. I miss small connections. My last office job was at Publicis. It was in Midtown, which I don't love, but it was a great office at Broadway and 52nd, way up on like the 26th, 7th, 8th floor. The views were stunning, but small connections. The guys who run security as they let you in, like you might know their name, you don't know them super well. The woman at the coffee bar, I remember seeing her crying one day, and we ended up getting in this chat. It turns out her father was sick, but he's better now, and we were just, there was this little life connection. I don't have that now because I don't go anywhere. People you might stumble upon and they just had a baby, or they're leaving the company, or that social fabric is so crucial. I mean, writers' jobs are so lonely anyway, but it's so wonderful to be around the little energy of people, the little connection that makes you feel part of something.
Okay, there's a next one is from Lynn Hendy.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a film or TV interest in your poem books?
Well, the first book, Love Poems for Married People, was optioned. I wrote a treatment and a sort of a very rough script with the production company, and we were we went out in either January or February. I think it was February. We went out to one place. What was that place that was around for like an hour? What's that? It was an internet service, the 10-minute things. What was it called? Quibi?
Oh, yes.
So we pitched it to Quibi, which was going to be the next Netflix. And, that died after, it was the Pacer. It was the GMC Pacer of internet startups. But with COVID, I don't know if the production company and the people involved are still interested in it. I think it could be kind of funny and charming and get me into the Screen Actors Guild, but
Their health insurance is really good.
so good. It's so good. Andrew Bruce, I miss talking about hockey too. Andrew Bruce, one of the best people I've ever worked with. Yeah, so it's strange to miss office life, especially when the pace of work for so many years has been 6 days a week at the office. I mean, how many months went by where you weren't in the office on a weekend?
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, all the time. And you're just like, oh, for God's sakes. And it's just the idea that we miss this intimacy and the people and the energy of it. And if you want to feel all that at the holidays,
I was gonna have it like on a music stand behind me, like the.
I like it. Do you play the guitar? I see a guitar. Or is that Anna's?
That's Anna's.
And the piano?
That's for the children.
That's a prop. It's just a prop.
Next one.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I don't want to keep people. And also like we're way into cocktail hour.
There are 4 more questions.
Oh, okay. I'd love to answer them.
Lynn Hindi again. How often do you make yourself laugh out loud? Because you make me laugh out loud so often.
Lynn Hendy is one of my favorite people on the planet. She's a producer of many wonderful films. She just did the Julie Taymor film about, oh God, I'm blanking on the name. Lynn, send the name of the film. It's a wonderful film about Gloria Steinem, right? Is it called Gloria? Lynn was the executive producer on that film and was kind enough to option my first novel. Go and watch Gloria, please. An incredibly fascinating woman. But she optioned the first novel, which was called what's it called? Truth in Advertising, with our dear late departed friend, Bob Chardoff, one of my favorite humans. I never make myself laugh. I'll tell you who makes me laugh out loud is my daughter, who's one of the funniest people I've ever met, and my son. They make me laugh out loud. Lulu's the funniest person maybe I've ever met in my life. My sister, my daughter.
Okay. My friend Penelope, she wants to read a question if she wants.
Okay.
I have a question actually about your books. I was wondering, how'd you come up with the idea? Like, where'd you come up with the idea to make them?
Like all of my best ideas, Pilu, it was not my idea. It was someone else's idea.
Really?
Yeah. It was some people at Penguin Random House, which is a big publishing company in New York. And I was at a cocktail party with my editor, Sally, and we were chatting with a woman who was a big, powerful woman. And she had been a fan of this short piece I had written. And she said, we should make it into a book. And I thought she was kidding. And then Sally called me a couple of days later and said she was serious, we should make it into a book. So I never thought I could I never thought I could write 50 or 60 of these and make them work, because it was hard. It was harder than I thought. but I had a lot of help. So
There's one more. Lynn Handy just said a bunch like, this is hilarious and everything. Anthony Garetti
yep.
said, do I get a free book for attending?
He absolutely, you get a, with every purchase of a book, you get a book for free. It's, for every $15.95, and for you, Garetti, it's $20.95, and then it's free. So the answer is definitely yes. Listen, if there's no more, thank you. It means a ton to me that anyone showed up and stayed and listened. And it's such a strange time, and it's a weird way to launch a book, but it means the world to me that people took the time to stay on this call, and to Charlie McKittrick and his wonderful questions, and Chris at Powerhouse. Thank you. It's
Good job, Dad.
really appreciate
And
it.
Lulu, I mean, Lulu is the quiet, the real MC of the show.
There's no question. And it's Lulu's the best writer in the family. Expect big things from that 11-year-old. Listen, thank you, everyone. Charlie, you're the best. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for writing. It's really great. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Lulu, and everyone who hung out in the chat. If you missed any of the event, it'll be on YouTube. We've already had a lot of people buy the book online, but if you have not yet, you should do so. I've got the link in the chat.
You're raking
Thanks
in
all.
all day,
Enjoy
John.
the evening, and everyone stay safe.
All right.
Take care.